exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hey, welcome along on tonight's Mark Steyn Show. All sorts of things. The first transgender member of parliament. Ooh, lessons from the Falklands War. Criminalising the Bible. And, of course, the most vital part of the show, all the more important, when we live in the constant swirl of a blizzard of lies. Your comments and questions. What you think. Unvarnished, unadulterated. Send your thoughts along to GBViews at gbnews.uk, that's email, or at GBnews, that's Twitter. But first, as ever, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Good evening. This is the latest news with me, Polly Middlehurst. Germany's Vice-Chancellor has activated national emergency plans in case Russia halts its gas supply to Europe. That comes after the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, signed a decree to stop its supply of gas from tomorrow unless contracts are paid in Russia's currency, the ruble. Germany and France have described the move as blackmail. Downing Street says it's monitoring the situation, but highlighted that the UK is less reliant on Russia for its gas than its European counterparts. Meanwhile, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg has said there's no evidence Russia is scaling back its attack. Officials in Ukraine say Russian forces were withdrawing from Chernobyl and the Kyiv region and heading for Belarusian borders. NATO says the troops are simply regrouping and that further attacks are expected. Ukraine's former President Petro Poroshenko, who's in Kyiv, told GB News today the capital is still being shelled.
We have shelling, artillery shelling, multi-rocket launch shelling, and just besides me, we have a residential building which was attacked by cruise missiles of Russia. They attack us permanently. The last cruise missiles was happening just 50 minutes ago.
Well, the UK has announced 14 additional sanctions against Russian interests, with the broadcaster RT among those targeted for spreading propaganda. The Defence Secretary has also announced more lethal aid will be sent on to Ukraine, and that comes after Ukraine's president called for tougher sanctions against Moscow, more weapons and help in obtaining EU membership. In other news today, the last of 47 police officers investigated over their handling of the Rotherham child sex abuse scandal has been cleared of misconduct. It means no officer has lost their job. At least 1,400 children in Rotherham had been subjected to child sex abuse by gangs over a 16-year period from 1997. The officers were investigated over their handling of complaints. The MP for Rotherham has accused South Yorkshire Police of institutional failures, saying it can't be right that no officers have faced consequences for their actions. Labour has launched its local election campaign in Bury in Greater Manchester today, with Sir Keir Starmer pledging to cut energy bills for each household by up to £600. The party's warning that households can expect to be more than £2,500 worse off due to the cost of living crisis. The Labour leader says the public deserves better than what he calls the pathetic response from government. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now more from Mark Steyn.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Palace of Westminster has belatedly caught up with the New Zealand Parliament, the Trinidad Senate, various provincial legislatures in Canada, and now has its first openly transgender member, Jamie Wallace. Yes, you can't say the left don't play for big game. The abolition of biological sex is one of the most momentous events of our time, of human history, at least until the Mullers take over, and Tory agenda items seem small beer by comparison. So it's great to see Conservatives getting with the beat, and Mr. Wallace, or Ms. Wallace, as presumably he'll be, deciding to transition. Mr., Ms., Mrs., Miss Wallace came out as transgender just a few months after a curious late-night car crash in which he wrapped his motor around a lamppost in Llanblethlean. He now says that that was because he hooked up on the internet and then, unfortunately, the chap he was hooking with didn't use a condom, so he was stressed out and didn't see the lamppost, and now he's transgender, if I follow all this correctly. Boris Johnson, who was having some low sport with Sir Keir Starmer and the Labour Party's apparent preference for women with penises, has now swivelled and is offering his full support. I generally prefer the Boris of cheap, vulgar, transphobic jokes to the Boris of modish, wokist hogwash. But that's why he's PM and I'm not. I feel a bit like a Rip Van Winkle. I fell asleep, woke up 3 decades later and discovered that Mrs. Thatcher had transitioned into Boris Johnson, which doesn't seem right at all. Debbie Hayton is transgender, but of somewhat iconoclastic bent, and has said that Jamie Wallace's trans declaration raises more questions than it answers. Debbie, I sort of agree with you on that, in part because of this criminal case that preceded it. So it reminded me a bit of things like Kevin Spacey, where he got accused of some criminal assault and then said, by the way, I'm homosexual, I'm coming out, I'm gay. I'm always very suspicious when these great personal revelations are also attended by criminal complaints. So this doesn't seem quite on the up and up to me. What do you make of it?
Well, it's hard to know what was going on through Wallace's mind here. This statement that he made came out at about 3 o'clock in the morning. So what fueled this statement in the middle of the night? Who knows, really? But one thing is to be sure that there's been a lot of talk about who will be the first trans MP. Britain needs a trans MP. I don't think Wallace was the type of trans MP that those activists were looking for.
No, it is odd, but as I mentioned, you know, Trinidad, New Zealand, Canada, various European countries have all gone there. What I find odd about, I'm interested in your take. I'm, interested in your take on this, as you are trans yourself. And one of the things that's changed in recent years, and I think it really is a change, is that before the point of transitioning was to be a woman and everybody to treat you as a woman and to believe you that you were a woman and that you're a woman. A friend of mine, I had no idea she was trans until I woke up one morning and she was outed on the front page of The Sun. And she was completely mortified by that because she hadn't gone to all that trouble to be in some kind of freak category. She'd gone through that trouble to be a woman just like all other women. And so the big change to me in the last decade or so is that trans women is now a category in itself, which is a little strange and kind of self-defeating, don't you feel?
Well, we never used to hear about trans women years ago. There was two groups that we did hear about. There were transsexuals and there were transvestites.
Right.
And we're
right.
You know, we're familiar with those terms from years ago. There was a tiny number of transsexuals. Sometimes you read about them being outed in the newspapers, but there was rather a lot more transvestites. Now, when was the last time you heard the word transvestite, Mark?
No, that's quite true. And I'll add something. Add something else to. No, I know they haven't, and that's what's slightly. That's why I'm slightly weirded out by the Jamie Wallace thing, because there's a huge number of people, far bigger than the number of people who want to have what we used to call sex-free assignments. So there's like Malcolm Forbes, the founder of Forbes magazine. He liked going around in kilts, not because he belonged to any Scottish clan, but because he just liked the swish of a tartan dress on his thighs. There's always been, there's Bunny Roger, a great British war hero, who liked to go into war, he liked to go lead his men into battle wearing full makeup. There's always been people like that. But this creation of a separate sex, as it were, that there are men, there are women, there are trans women and there are trans men now. That seems to me quite a novelty and actually quite a big jump, quite a big leap.
Yes, it is. And as I was saying, there used to be these two groups, transsexuals and transvestites. Now we just hear about trans women. So both these groups have come together as trans women. But go back years, transsexuals were pitted, transvestites were ridiculed. But now trans women are lauded for being brave and stunning, and brave is the jargon that gets thrown about. So what I looked at here is, I don't think Jamie Wallace is anything special or anything too unusual. The study which I cited in Spectator was an academic study of over 1,000 men, and found that 2.8% of men admitted to the researchers at least one episode of cross-dressing. Now, if 2.8% are going to admit to it, you guess there's rather a few more around than that. And even at 2.8%, if there's 430 men in Parliament, I reckon that's about 12.
Yeah, but what does that actually mean? I mean, when you said have admitted to cross-dressing, when I was at school, at one point for some kind of variety show, we all went to the girls' school nearby, dressed up in the girls' school uniform, so in like mini skirts and fishnet stockings, and we sang, I believe it was a hit from the late 70s, Matchstalk Men and Matchstalk Cats and Dogs. A pop hit from the late 70s, and we all looked fabulous. We had terrific legs. We looked fabulous in our stockings and our mini skirts and our little push-up bras, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought, I quite like the shimmer of silk stockings on my legs. It's very pleasant. I don't know whether that is the basis. I would imagine that a lot of those numbers you quoted are people who've done that once, people who've done that half a dozen times, but not people who want to deconstruct the entirety of society over it.
Well, where is this rush to be deconstructing society from? As I say, I keep going back to the groups that were there before. We had transsexuals who wanted to fit in with the society, just in a different way. Transvestites who perhaps went on golfing week, told their wives they went on golfing weekends or whatever they used to do. But now we have moved that to this new way of looking at things, which really does want to deconstruct society. So our sex is not determined by our biology, but it's determined by how we may choose to feel about ourselves. Now, what Jamie Wallace represents, who knows? This is why I said there's more questions than answers here. But the ideology which is pushing this to make this interesting, we should be concerned about. If we change the very basis of society, what it means to be a man and what it means to be a woman, that affects everybody, not just 2%, not just a tiny number.
That's true. I remember, which I think was around the time it all started to change with Caitlyn Jenner, whatever that was, 5 or 6 years ago, and the New York Post ran a headline, Caitlyn Jenner still has her penis. And I remember being struck by those words, her penis. And we've seen it since. Leah Thomas still has, quote, her penis, and that's part of the reason she's powering through those swimming heats with those poor old biological girls. And so we have a situation now where essentially we've created a new sex, as it were, to the point where the leader of Her Majesty's opposition is he's asked a question: can women have penises? And he just stammers and flounders. And we know he's being dishonest here. We know he has a view on this, but he's just incapable of articulating a view.
Well, he's terrified of upsetting the wrong sort of people, I think. Of course, women don't have penises. There's two sexes. Male people have penises and female people don't. Women are female. That's common sense. That's what we know. That's what we've always known. But we're not supposed to think those things anymore. We're supposed to come up with the idea where somebody can have a penis and be a woman. Well, we can't. Even if it's removed, you still don't change your sex if you have it removed. As I've said to people, if a man has an unfortunate industrial accident, he doesn't turn into a woman as a result.
No, it's a very but what it has had in political terms, in Keir Starmer terms, if you like, because I'm not sure whether he's had his removed, but what it does is it lowers the bar, doesn't it? It lowers the entry. I mean, I personally, you know, when I said to you, I quite like dressing up and singing that song when I was in school, I certainly would have far more reservations about having my private parts removed. So if in fact a woman can have a penis, then doesn't that actually lower the entry level for all kinds of people to suddenly identify as trans?
Well, yes, I've talked about that. It lowers the barrier to entry quite significantly, doesn't it? So, but it's what we mean by it's what we mean by trans, and it has changed. I don't think the general public really realise. People have this idea that a trans woman is somebody who has been through a meaningful transition. Well, it isn't. You know, the category is open to anybody who wants to identify as a trans woman with one condition: you've got to be male. The only group that can't identify as trans women are women.
Yep. That's actually a good way of putting it. Do you think the right is getting head faked on this? Because you know, I get tons of mail, and I will, you know, after you've been on the show, in which people say, oh, yes, but it's all about chromosomes, XX and XY and whatever it is. But the fact now that you can be a woman with a penis, or like all these sad teenage girls identifying as men, you can be a man without a penis. Doesn't that sort of undermine the whole chromosome argument? Because in a sense, they're now just creating entirely separate identities.
Well, there are two separate issues. My own view is that sex matters. If you've got XY chromosomes, you've got male gonads, you've got male sex characteristics like I do, then I am male. There's no doubt about that. There's no question about that. But there's also our perception of other people, and that's how we tend to judge sex, and that's how we view somebody's sex, by our perception, how we perceive them. And until recently, it wasn't a problem, because the way we perceived somebody was their sex. Then along came a group of transsexuals who fit into society in the in the in the way that the other sex would fit in, so they didn't cause too many problems. But what we've got now are a group where we perceive them as one sex, but they claim to be another sex, and that's what's causing the problem. And it's causing huge problems for progressive political parties who feel they have to speak nonsense really to be kind to people. And I said to them, I said, well, you know, I don't want you to speak nonsense to be seen to be kind to me. You know, I want you to give me the same respect as you would give anybody else, which is not to wrap me in cotton wool and not to speak nonsense in some attempt to protect my feelings. I'm an adult the same as anybody else.
Well, when you talk about nonsense, we had Eve Ensler, who was the author of the hit play The Vagina Monologues, which became a sensation in the 90s, and which all kinds of celebrity women appeared in, and girls at college, American colleges used to perform it every Valentine's Day as an alternative to heterosexual romance. They'd have feminist self-affirmation by performing the vagina monologues, and then in the space of about 20 minutes it all turned on a sixpence, and she was excoriated for implying that having a vagina was anything to do with being a woman. And so she put a penis in the vagina monologues, and then she was told that that was just tokenism, having just one penis in the vagina monologues, and so she put another penis in the vagina monologues. And at that point, you do feel that there is actually a serious campaign here, basically to reduce biological sex to something entirely meaningless.
Yes, and who is pushing that and who is driving it is one question. But what is clearer, who tends to suffer from that? So you've mentioned a woman here who has suffered. I do get comments from the way I campaign, and I guess the moment you've opened your mouth on it as well, Mark, you will as well. But it tends to be women who suffer unduly. It's women who tend to lose their jobs. It's women who are attacked and vilified simply for defending their sex. Those rights which they've fought hard for the last 100 years or more are suddenly being taken away from them by basically because people are demanding access to those spaces and to those rights which the people.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've just lost Debbie there, but thank you for that, Debbie. And I do think we may in fact be looking at something much bigger. Setting aside Tory backbenchers, there may be something much bigger going on here. Here's Carrie Burke, the president of Disney Entertainment Content, explaining why she's mandating that henceforth 50% of Disney characters will be LGBTQI. I always lose it after the Q. I can never remember but there are a lot of other letters after the Q these days. So she's saying 50% of characters will be LGBT, QWERTY and other minorities.
I'm here as a mother of two queer children, actually, one transgender child and one pansexual child, and also as a leader. And that was the thing that really got me, because I have heard so much from so many of my colleagues over the course of the last couple of weeks in open forums and through emails and phone conversations.
One transgender child and one pansexual child. I'm not even sure I know what a pansexual is. I do get the feeling, though, that they're getting up to all sorts of things that have never even occurred to me. On a practical matter, though, is the abolition of biological sex mainly about the abolition of women? Let us know your thoughts. We'll get to that when we get back, and we'll talk about a victory for the Bible in court and the lessons of the Falklands War. Don't touch that dial. We're coming straight back.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Let's get to your comments. Piercy says, man, woman, trans, or a tree. Who cares? An MP that's not a liar is all we want. In that case, Piercy, vote for the tree. Because that's the only one who's male MPs, female MPs, trans MPs, they're all going to lie to you. Vote for the tree. I think that I shall never see an MP lovely as a tree. I think that was Joyce Kilmer's famous poem, if I recall. A Twitter user says, sick to death of the trans issue, which is minuscule in number, yet swallows up so much time. Don't you get it, Twitter user? It doesn't matter that 99.999999999% of people aren't interested in transitioning. It's the fact that the few who do matter more than you, Mr. Twitter user. I'm absolutely astonished when people say things like that. We're rewriting birth certificates now to remove the words mother and father. In certain jurisdictions in the Western world, they now do not identify the sex at birth because they wait for the kid to decide what gender he wants to be once he's 4 or 5 or whatever. So this may be minuscule, and in fact it's not. It's that minuscule. It's actually galloping ahead, particularly with these stories of girls who decide they're boys. But furthermore, your point, Twitter user, I don't mean to pick on you, but I think I'm going to pick on you because I'm a little giddy and lightheaded, so I might go ahead and do it. Look around you. You've lost your country. What's conservative about the United Kingdom after 12 years of so-called conservative government? Nothing. And in part, it's because of people who say, oh, this doesn't really matter. A reduction in, possible reduction in capital gains tax, things like that matter. That's what really matters. No, you've lost everything. You've lost your whole bloody country by not recognizing that the left is serious about these things. So the point that male cancer victims attending at NHS hospitals are now asked when they're being examined if they happen to be pregnant. There's only 2, 3, 4, 7 pregnant men, so-called, but everybody has to be asked that question when they're sitting in some god-awful NHS hospital with stage 4 cancer. It doesn't change it. You're looking at it all wrong, Twitter user. It doesn't change it for the minuscule in number of people who want to transition. It changes it, as Debbie was just saying, for the 99.99% who don't. And Conservatives have lost the entire planet by their stupidity on things like that. They've lost their country, they've lost the Western world, they've lost the planet, because the left is serious about reducing the pillars of society to rubble, and the right said, oh, well, that's just a small number of people. I'd really just like it if we just talked about mortgages and corporate income tax. Complete waste of time. That's why you've lost your country. We're introducing a new feature here on the Mark Steyn Show, Portent of Tomorrow. This is for those stories that never make the headlines, but are an interesting glimpse of where we're headed. You may have seen that Liz Truss and her Russian counterpart, Sergei Lavrov, were both in Delhi today. There's Liz looking ridiculous in her mask. India's decision not only to ignore the sanctions, but to strengthen its ties to Moscow is one of the most interesting developments out of this new war. And you don't need me to tell you who was the most important minister from overseas visiting India today. Here's another interesting development. The Kremlin said on Wednesday that Russian President Vladimir Putin and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz had agreed in a call that experts from their countries would discuss how payment for Russian gas exports could be made in rubles. The sanctions aren't working, and one of the consequences of that is that Joe Biden and the gang may have hastened the demise of the dollar as the global reserve currency. And when that happens, kaboom, there goes the known world and the abyss opens up. A few weeks ago, we talked to Päivi Räsänen, the former Finnish Minister of the Interior, who found herself in the dock at Helsinki District Court on charges of violating the equality and dignity of homosexuals. What exactly did the accused do? Well, she quoted the Bible. And by putting her on trial, the Finnish state seemed to be saying that Christian scripture is potentially criminal, and if you quote it, you could be jailed. Well, Päivi Räsänen is back with us, and congratulations, Päivi, because you beat the rap. You were acquitted of the charge, and I guess that's good news, but how are you holding up after this legal ordeal?
Yes, I have to say that I'm very thankful and relieved now. I got yesterday the outcome of the Helsinki District Court, and they acquitted all of my 3 charges. This has been a long process. It has lasted almost 3 years. It has been quite hard. But at the same time, I feel that it has been my calling and my privilege to defend freedom of speech and freedom of religion. So I think that these discussions have been very important in the Finnish society.
Are you worried, though, because you're a very tough and resilient person? As you say, it consumed 3 years of your life. Anyone who has ever been in any long-running legal battle knows that the process is the punishment, that you may eventually win 3, 5, 7, 12 years down the road, but you'll never get that portion of your life back. Are you worried that a lot of people, a lot of your fellow Finns and a lot of other people will be just thinking, oh, well, look, that poor woman got dragged into court for 3 years. Maybe I should just keep quiet and not quote that particular passage and maybe just be a little more subdued about quoting scripture in public. Are you worried that there will be the so-called chilling effect at which you win your victory but 1,000 other people fall silent?
Yes, you are absolutely right, and I have been worried just about this because the process in itself has been like some kind of punishment. I have been sitting in several interrogations of the police, altogether 13 hours in police station, interrogated about my religious views and my faith. The Bible on the table and police asking me, what do you mean by the concept like sin or shame, and what does the letter to Romans mean to you, and so on. But at the same time, I believe that the outcome of the district court is an encouragement to Christians and to all people to use their rights and their freedoms to express their faith and express their conviction. So in the Finnish media, there has been a huge attention to that whole process, and also to yesterday when we got the acquittal. So I'm very happy.
What was the court's reasoning, as it were? Why were you not insulting the dignity of homosexuals? What was it that enabled them to? Because I'm sure they actually decided, oh God, we'll never hear the end. If we convict this woman, then suddenly the world is going to come down on us. They're going to say, who are these judges who are saying that the Bible is hate speech or whatever? What was their reasoning in acquitting you?
Yes, of course, in Finland we have the constitution that guarantees the freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and also the international agreements that Finland has also accepted. And these had a very big effect and impact to the outcome of the court. But there was also the problem that the prosecutor made some false accusations against me, because the prosecutor claimed that I had said something that I had never said. For example, she accused that I had said that God has not even created the homosexuals, or that the homosexuals are inferior compared with other people. I have never said anything like that, and it is against my conviction. So I think that it was quite easy to defend me, because there were false accusations, false charges, so that the judges could see that I have not said anything like that. I have to say that the whole process was quite absurd.
No, I think it always is, and it's interesting to me how careless prosecutors can get. When you were here last time, I raised, I think, a fairly obvious point. You know, in your country, as in many other countries, Europe has become largely post-Christian. Christendom is post-Christian. For many people, they don't know the Bible as they would have done just 30 or 40 or 50 years ago. And there's no doubt that in a sense, the secularists, 21st century secularists, find it easy to attack the Bible. But as I said to you a couple of months ago, they go all quiet when it's the more blood-curdling passages of the Quran. It would be interesting to see a case like this, where if you look at the way a lot of Islamic scholars who say the only question about homosexuality in Islam is whether it should be punished by setting someone alight or throwing them off the roof. There's a lot of Islamic scholars who say that. And yet, oddly enough, Islam is never taken into court the way you and the Christian Bible were. There's a double standard, isn't there?
Yes, there has been also a lot of debate about the same issue in Finland, because in public, also in Finnish media, there have been some Islamist preachers who have said many such things that I could have never said, or any Christians, but they have not been prosecuted or any charges have not been with them. But you are right that we are living in a secular, post-Christian country and tide, and it means that people don't anymore know the Bible, and I think that this is one reason for this situation where I have been now, because in the trial, the prosecutor general, the prosecutor said that the doctrine, that my doctrine in itself is insulting or offending, and she said that it is the doctrine of the Bible: love the sinner but hate the sin, and she said that this doctrine is in itself insulting. And this is very dangerous, because I think that the core message of the Bible is that God, He hates the sin, but He loves the sinner. And we see when Jesus had to die on the cross, we see how much God loved people, but at the same time, how much He hated the sin. So I think that this is the core problem in this process.
Yeah, you're not allowed to make that distinction anymore, and we're supposed to love. We're supposed to love the sin. In fact, as those police officers said to you, I mean, that's what's interesting to me. Is they're asking you what you understand by the word sin, because I bet you that they do not actually believe in the concept of sin. It's whatever's your bag is cool. And that's that. But I'm glad you stood up to them, because it would be an extraordinary thing if, even in today's world, if the biggest selling book in history were to be ruled hate speech by a court in, as I said, what we used to think of as Christendom. So I know you must be exhausted after 3 years of this thing. Nobody knows what it's like to be in a big consequential court case until they're in one. But you've stood up to it, and I hope people take advantage of it and maybe reacquaint some of your fellow Europeans with some choice bits of scripture. Thank you very much, Päivi, and congratulations to you. And thank you to that Finnish court for not being totally bonkers, as so many judges are today. Coming up, you can stump the Steyn, GB Views at gbnews.uk, plus the Falklands War on its 40th anniversary. Don't go anywhere, we're coming right back.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Coming up on Dan Wootton Tonight, social media activist Zuby, political firebrand Anne Widdecombe and GB News star Mark Dolan are all on hand to give me their uncensored takes on the headlines of the day. And I'll break down the top stories with my superstar panel, the Conservative commentator Dominique Samuels, the former Tory London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author and journalist Amy Nicol. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
"40 years ago, April 2nd, 1982, the Falkland Islanders woke up to find that Argentine troops had begun a full-scale invasion. The islands were virtually undefended, 68 Royal Marines, 11 sailors, a couple of dozen Falklands Defence Force men, Governor Hunt with his Browning 9mm pistol, plus 2 Englishmen, a Canadian, and the governor's chauffeur. Within a few days, General Galtieri had installed a new military governor on the islands, and the conquered British subjects were expected to, quote, adjust to the new arrangements. To be sure, there might be one or two glitches in switching from English common law to Latin American military dictatorship, but these could soon be ironed out. That was more or less the line, not just of the Argies, but also of the British left and of the defeatist wing of the Tory party and of Britain's sanctions-breaking partners in the European community and of the UN and of the American media and even of a substantial chunk of the Reagan administration, such as the late Jean Kirkpatrick. They didn't all put it that way, but that was the upshot. Chance of restoring the status quo, that's to say British sovereignty, in the South Atlantic, 0%. And then Mrs. Thatcher decided to dispatch a task force. And even that seemed faintly absurd, at least according to the editors of Newsweek. Look at this graphic. The Empire strikes back. Ha ha! Going to war over a colony 8,000 miles away. This is the 1980s. Who does that? General Galtieri spent his last 20 years telling his dwindling circle of acquaintances that it never occurred to him the British would fight back. And who can blame him? In the 70s, the map looked very different. The Soviets held half of Europe, had neutered most of the rest, and were advancing in every corner of the globe, from Afghanistan to Ethiopia to Grenada. The West never roused itself, except occasionally to cooperate. Cuban troops were in Africa, and Pierre Trudeau's contribution to the Cold War was to allow Castro's military aircraft to refuel in Canada. America had been humbled in Vietnam and humbled in Iran, where the smiling eunuch Jimmy Carter had allowed a superpower to be turned into a laughingstock with cocky mullahs poking the corpses of US servicemen on TV. So why would General Galtieri have had any qualms about seizing the Falklands? The Falklands War is the decisive war of the Cold War because it's the one the world, like Galtieri, never expected. It marks the dividing line between the free world's territorial losses of the 60s and 70s and its gains in the 80s and 90s. Lieutenant General Jonathan Riley is a military historian, and we're always pleased to see him. Jonathan, what's your take on the Falklands at 40?
Well, how many people remember it? An awful lot of people don't, but they should, because you're exactly right. It marked that period when the combination of Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan decided that communism was not going to have it all its own way, and that the West could push back with a mixture of military confrontation, both conventional and nuclear, plus exercising its economic power to overheat the engine of the communist economies and make them seize up. And the Falklands War was a demonstration of what could be done if the means and the will were there. And thank heavens it was Margaret Thatcher there, because without her the means would have been there, but the will, I'm sure, never would have been.
No, and it's interesting, I recall a lot of the more elderly chaps around her, such as Willie Whitelaw and Lord Carrington, were actually quite pessimistic about Britain's chances in the South Atlantic. And indeed, the Reagan administration, which you mentioned, a lot of them were too. They thought Britain was bound to lose this, and that therefore it would cause a big heap of trouble with their pals in the Latin American juntas. And not to be sentimental about it, but the most principled support actually came from the Commonwealth, not just the Royal Australian Navy and the Royal New Zealand Navy, who took on the British duties in the South China Seas and whatever, but even places like the Gambia and Sierra Leone, which allowed refueling on the way to Ascension Island. So it was a very Thatcherite, very British, and a very Commonwealth family thing in that way. It was slightly different from NATO or G7 or any of that stuff.
Yes, it was completely out with that. Let me just pick up one or two things you've said, because, of course, Lord Carrington had to resign in the aftermath of the invasion because of the misleading signals that our Foreign Office had given to the Argentinians, which was certainly a contributory factor in them launching their invasion. I also think amongst the British services at that time, Royal Navy, Royal Air Force, Army, Royal Marines, I don't think once and I must caveat this by saying, although I was serving in the Army, I was a war dodger then, and I didn't go to the Falklands. But I don't think anybody seriously considered the fact that on the battlefield, we were going to be beaten. Absolutely not. And to be fair to the Americans, they were giving quite a lot of help on the quiet. They actually offered an aircraft carrier.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have been able to operate it, of course, but they actually offered it. And they had fitted many of our submarines and ships with certain systems which made life much easier for the crews. What a contrast to our neighbours across the Channel, who were supplying Exocet missiles to the enemy.
Yes, it was. In a sense, it prefigured the division of a decade or so later, because it is true that the European community, as it was then, was not on board with what Britain was doing at all. This may seem a rather stupid and obvious question to ask, but could we do it today?
Yeah, well, I was thinking about that, funnily enough, before we came on. In a sense, we don't have to, because we have Mount Pleasant airfield there now, which allows rapid reinforcement. But of course, rapid reinforcement requires decisions by politicians. And what politician did you ever meet who would make a decision about a problem until the problem become a crisis and it was therefore too late? But if you allow them some charity, then it's perfectly possible that we could conduct a reinforcement without the need to send a task force of that size. Of course, We do have at least one aircraft carrier that could be deployed. We have a couple of amphibious ships. Sadly, HMS Ocean, a flat top that would have been superb as a helicopter and commando carrier, has been decommissioned. We have the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. What we don't have that we have then is the large numbers of frigates, destroyers and submarines that provided all the security for the amphibious task force. So we could probably do something in a combination of reinforcement and a naval task force, but it wouldn't look like what we did then.
No, that's true, and the nature of, I mean, obviously we also have things today that we didn't have then, such as drones, which the Ukrainians are using very effectively at the moment. So the nature of warfare does change, but the nature of will and of national confidence and of civilizational purpose doesn't change. And I think that's as important to anything. Mrs. Thatcher simply, when people said the Falklands don't matter, it's an obscure British colony, we're getting out of the colony business. She looked at it as, 1,500 British subjects who are going to be living in a military dictatorship, and she was not prepared to let that happen.
No, absolutely not. And the question of geography is in a sense irrelevant. They were British. They felt themselves to be British. They wished to remain British. And the fact that the Falkland Islands are in the South Atlantic doesn't really matter. The problem would be the same if it was the Isle of Wight, because or the Channel Islands. They were as British as those people were, and entitled to protection.
Thank you very much for saying that, because Dickie Arbiter was on, the Queen's press secretary was on a couple of days ago, and he seemed to think it was ridiculous, the idea of the Queen being Queen of places that are a long way away. But as you correctly point out,
I don't think she sees it
geography
that way.
is... Yeah, she doesn't see it that way, and geography is nothing to do with it. And as the Premier of Gibraltar put it the other day, we're all part of the British family of nations. Thank you very much for that assessment, Jonathan. The Falklands War will continue to teach lessons in the years ahead. Let's close things out with just a bit of stumping. Jib says, Mark, we need to be fracking. We need more North Sea oil. We need more nuclear, all in parallel with renewables. This will secure our energy for decades to come and provide thousands upon thousands of sustainable jobs. Would love to hear your thoughts. I've said it before. It's pathetic to see the Russians demanding the Germans and the Italians pay them in rubles for gas. But they're dependent on Russian gas, and he can tear up the contract. He doesn't have the contract. They don't have the gas. So who loses? If you don't have energy independence, if you actually do what Boris Johnson is doing and say, we're forswearing energy independence, because it gives me an easier time with my missus, then something like this happens, and you understand that Putin has the Germans and the Italians over a barrel of oil or gas. Joe says, are the expats still working in China devoid of morality? Surely they're helping prop up an enemy of the West. We're all devoid of morality. Every time we go to Crap You Like and buy a T-shirt for 7 shillings and threepence halfpenny made by Chinese slave labour, we're devoid of morality. It cuts all over the place, from the Britons working in China to the British buying Chinese crap in these islands. That'll do it for me, never fear. Dan Wootton is here to thump your Thursday for 2 thrilling hours. Stay safe, stay free.
Hello, Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Going to be cold overnight. A frosty start for many of us on Friday. A dry, bright day, but a definite chill in the air, and there will still be some wintry showers around. High pressure is close by, but around this high, the winds are coming in from the north. That is why it is so chilly out there today and why it'll be frosty overnight. And we'll keep a few wintry showers, parts of Kent, the east of East Anglia and northeast England, eastern Scotland. Seeing some showers coming in, and with temperatures dropping, that could lead to some icy conditions, as well as not being very pleasant to drive through those snow showers. Further west, many places just dry and clear. but it will be cold. In rural spots, maybe -5 in Wales, Northern Ireland, maybe as low as -8 where there's snow lying on the ground in Scotland. There is a chance of seeing the aurora tonight in parts of Scotland in particular. Tomorrow then, it's dry and bright for many, but we'll continue with some wintry showers over northeast England, southeast Scotland and parts of Kent and East Anglia as well. And later on, we'll see some wet weather coming into western Scotland with snow on the hills. Otherwise, a lot of dry, sunny weather, but still cold. Not as cold as today. Still a noticeable breeze, but it won't be quite so icy as today's wind. Through Friday evening, wet weather will spread across Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, into North Wales and northwest England, with some snow still on the hills here. At low levels, it should be mostly rain, and that'll push during Saturday morning into South Wales and southwest England, again with some sleet and snow, especially over the hills. Petering out through the day, 1 or 2 showers in the east, but many of us on Saturday, again dry and bright, just nothing like as warm as it was last weekend, with temperatures, again, generally only in single figures, maybe up to 10 across parts of the south. At least by Saturday, though, the winds will be an awful lot lighter. So the weekend will be chilly, with many places dry and bright, but still a few wintry showers here and there.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as Disney pledges that half